Blair urges Obama to take a strong role in pursuing Middle East peace. But how will Obama's theme of change apply to foreign policy? And could solving the long-standing Arab-Israeli conflict be the key to restoring America's trustworthiness in the Middle East? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Lauren Taylor. President-elect Barack Obama says he'll reshape US foreign policy. But what will that mean for the Middle East? He promises to put the Israeli-Palestinian conflict back on the American agenda. He blames the Bush administration for having neglected the issue. But is his position really that different? When it comes to Israel and Palestine, many expect business as usual. In a speech before a major right-wing pro-Israel lobby group, Obama showed a similar commitment to Israel as his predecessors.
Now, let me be clear. Israel's security is sacrosanct. It is non-negotiable. The Palestinians need a state. The Palestinians need a state that is contiguous and cohesive, and that allows them to prosper. But any agreement with the Palestinian people must preserve Israel's identity as a Jewish state with secure, recognized, defensible borders. And Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel, and it must remain undivided.
Well, that speech caused major disappointment among Arab and Israeli peace activists. They say American backing for an illegal annexation of East Jerusalem would preclude any peace agreement. Also, Obama chose to condemn Palestinian attacks on Israeli civilians, but did not even mention Palestinian civilians killed by Israeli airstrikes. Well, joining us now are our guests. In San Jose, California, Stephen Zunes. He's a professor of politics and chair of Middle East Studies at the University of San Francisco. In New York, Andy Martin. He's author of the book Obama, the Man Behind the Mask. And here in Doha, Abdel Bari Atwan. He's editor-in-chief of the London-based pan-Arab newspaper Al-Quds Al-Arabi. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. If I could go to Stephen Zunes first. In what way do you think Obama's policy will be different from Bush's?
Barack Obama is much less ideological. He's much smarter. He knows the situation well. And as a result, I think he, while firmly committed to Israel's right to exist in peace and security, that he recognizes that Israeli occupation policies are not only bad for the Palestinians, but ultimately bad for Israel as well. As a result, I hope that he will be a little more willing to apply a kind of tough love that is, unconditionally supporting Israel within its internationally recognized borders, be willing to pressure Israel to make territorial compromises that can indeed lead to a cohesive, contiguous Palestinian state.
But Abdel Bari Atwan, on that point of tough love, do you think that he's capable of making a difference?
I don't think he's capable today to do any difference simply because he has internal agenda. I don't believe the Arab-Israeli conflict will be on the top of his agenda. He will be involved more in Iraq. He will be involved more in Afghanistan, and also by the economic crisis, which actually now is hitting hard inside his country. So, but if we look at his speech on the AIPAC conference, it is extremely disappointing when he says Jerusalem should be united and remain as the Jewish state capital. I think this is non-starter for the Arabs and the Palestinians. I believe this kind of language will scare many people in the region, especially Obama, more in needs of Arabs than the Arab need him, to be honest.
Okay. Andy Martin, Blair, just in the last day or so, has said that the single most important thing for the new US administration is to press this issue of Middle East peace from day one, knowing that for the first time we have comprehensive political negotiations through the Annapolis process. Do you think that Annapolis is going to be the model that he's going to follow, or can he say, actually, Annapolis is dead and I want to do it my way?
Oh, I think he's definitely going to want to do it his way. He's going to want to sever any ties to the Bush policy. That will be where he puts his rouge or his makeup on the new policy. But I agree with the second guest who said that the overall Obama posture is very disappointing and negative. I think if people in the Middle East thought Obama was going to be different, they're likely to be very disappointed because the Democratic Party has traditionally been a stronger supporter of Israel than the Republican Party. President Bush was very much out of character in taking a blind loyalty to Israel. But it certainly would be the case that the Democratic Party has always had blind loyalty to Israel, and I don't expect that to change. Now, there may be some spinning and some atmospherics and some attempts to get the whole thing looking different, but at the substance, unless the Israelis are willing to get out of the West Bank, and unless they're willing to get rid of the apartheid wall and go back to the Green Line, nothing is going to change. And why would Barack Obama start applying tough love to this conflict when he's never applied tough love to anything in his life? It's going to be the same old talk, rhetoric, smoke and mirrors, staging. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to see another 8 years of nothing happening unless there's a dramatic difference that comes from the Middle East and not from Washington.
Stephen Nunes, your phrase there was picked up again of tough love. I mean, do you think that, do you share that sort of pessimism, or do you think there's room for a bit of optimism here?
I think a little bit of optimism. I think a number of factors have to come together, including, I would emphasize, pressure from the American people, because even though the government's policies towards Israel and Palestine hasn't shifted much, public opinion in the United States has shifted a lot in just the past 10, 20 years to a much more moderate position. Barack Obama's base is far more progressive on this issue than one would indicate by his speeches. And even in the speeches, like the AIPAC speech, as disappointing as it was, one could see glimmers of possible hope. For example, he did not say united Jerusalem. He said an undivided Jerusalem, as in not go back to the status quo ante pre-67 with barbed wire, sentries, physically dividing the city. That I think he is open to the idea of Palestinian control over Palestinian populated areas as a co-capital. Now, whether he will have the political capital to do that, to push it, given that he's going to get a lot of pressure from Congress, from the media, from entrenched interests, that's another question. But I think if he could wave a magic wand and do it his way, I think his position would be actually pretty close to the Israeli and Palestinian peace camps.
Abdelbari Atwan, can I bring you in on this issue? At the moment, is there automatically more goodwill at the moment for America simply because they voted for Obama? So do we have a sort of an element of change by the fact that he's there, and can he build on that, do you think?
Yes, I admit there is a huge optimism in the Middle East when Obama was elected, simply because the man understands the Muslim world very well. He actually is black, and also he was in Indonesia. He spent there 4 years. He's supposed to have better understanding of the Arab-Israeli conflict. He also used to have a good relationship with late Edward Said, Rashid Al-Khaldi, when he was in Columbia University or Harvard University. So at least he's supposed to have more understanding. So people, expectation of the Middle Eastern people on him is extremely high. Whether he will meet these expectations or not, we have to wait and see. But personally, I feel there are exhausting files in his table now, in his office. I mean, Iraq, he said several times he will give the Iraqi file priority to pull out his troops by 16 months from now. Also, he wants to increase the troops in Afghanistan, hoping that he can have more success there. I believe he is gambling here, and I think the gamble in Iraq wouldn't work. The gamble in Afghanistan could be a disastrous one. Simply, Afghanistan is a very, very difficult country, and it's not like Iraq. So I think when it comes to the Arab-Israeli conflict, again, he noticed that 8 years of President Bush administration ended with nothing, a big zero. The same thing, Clinton, 2 terms in office ended with another disaster, with another huge disappointment. Okay. So whether he will learn from this or not, it is time to wait and see.
If I could bring you back in, Andy Martin, something was mentioned a moment ago, the issue of how much room for manoeuvre he has, given the role of the Senate and Congress and so on. How much change I mean, even if he decided to be radical and make some big, bold decisions for Arab-Israeli peace, could he push them through?
Well, I don't think he can. There's a roadblock in both directions. There's sort of a dirty secret, and that's politicians propose and the real world disposes. I've lost track of how many years it's been a law in the United States that the embassy should be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, but no one's ever moved the embassy, and I don't expect Obama to do it. You do have to look at the man in context. He is a man of soaring rhetoric, who's able to trigger the most outrageous expectations, but his record of fighting entrenched interests, of being unpopular, of expending his political and personal capital is non-existent.
Okay,
so when he's faced with a powerful Israel lobby, he's not gonna take on the Israel lobby.
Okay, let me bring in Stephen Zunas on that specific point. Can he resist the lobbies? Also, I mean, does it matter who he has in his cabinet? I mean, for instance, the fact that he's appointed Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel, does that suggest a particular direction for the cabinet?
Not necessarily. The Chief of Staff is largely an administrative kind of role, and I think he figured that it'd be better to have Rahm Emanuel by his side as Chief of Staff than in Congress, where he might throw some roadblocks. I think
just
that
to point out to viewers, he's a big supporter of Israel.
Obviously, going to get a lot of. Yes, very much so. He's going to get a lot of flack on anything he tries to do in a decent direction, in my view. But unlike Clinton, unlike Bush, I don't think he has this ideological baggage. I think he has a pretty good idea of what needs to happen. And also, I think because of the nature of his support, as the fact that he was a community organizer, the fact that he has this great grassroots support, this whole network of through the internet and other mediums of activists on his behalf, who are mostly young, who are far more progressive, far more moderate on the Middle East than the older generation of Americans, that he may be willing to mobilize this base of support on his side to take on AIPAC if they get in the way. If he really thinks it's a priority, if he's willing to make the fight. That's still a question, but I think he could do it if he made the decision to.
Okay, well, on that note, we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at Obama's new policy towards Iraq and Iran, so do stay with us.